Shanda Vander Ark has quickly become one of the most notorious accused child killers in the history of court TV. Shanda had a son named Timothy with her ex-husband. Timothy had special needs. When they were living in Oklahoma, Shanda got into trouble with child services and was not supposed to be caring for Timothy. So Timothy's father took custody. But when he could not care for Timothy anymore, Shanda took him in and moved to Michigan. That's where things went really bad. Prosecutors say 15-year-old Timothy was starved to death, weighing just 69 pounds when he stopped breathing. Before he died, Timothy's brother sent Shanda a picture showing how emaciated Timothy was and texted her that they needed to feed him. That photograph was so graphic, the judge did not publicly display it in the courtroom. Instead, the jury passed the photo around. Then during her cross-examination, the prosecutor showed that photo to Shanda. And that's when this happened.
This is hours before he dies, right?
Yes, sir.
You look like that when you put him in the bathtub?
You can say what you want about that reaction. Was it real? Was it feigned? I don't know. But that picture that she saw, the photographs of that little boy, 15 years old, 69 pounds, Timothy Ferguson, that's what this story was about. A picture tells 1,000 words. This told more than 1,000. It told the story of the suffering of this young man and how his final days were. At the hands of his own mother and his brother, his own family. That's what they did. She didn't want to look at it. The judge didn't show it publicly in the courtroom. The jury got to see it because it's evidence in the case. I haven't seen it. But right now, in my hands, that photograph of Timothy. I haven't seen it yet. My producers got it for me. I'm going to take a look at it. And I'm going to describe to you what I can. And by you understanding my reaction to seeing this, I think it's the best way I can describe to you what's going on here. Now, for those of you who watched the trial, obviously, the jury got the message. It was a message that was clear. But I'm going to take a look at this. I think these photos are important, and we can't show them on the air. It happens from time to time in a lot of the trials we cover. Some of the evidence is too graphic. It's happened in many cases. It happened when I was down in Orange County, Florida. Little picture of Kaylee Marie that we couldn't show on the air. I saw it. That's why that story has never left me. And now I'm going to take a look at Timothy Ferguson for the first time. Every night at the end of the show, I say, don't forget to hug the kids. And I say that because of the responsibility we have as adults, as parents. But my goodness, the responsibilities that an actual parent has for their own child, to see this happening in real time in your own home and doing nothing to stop that from happening and making it happen. It's not like he's suffering from some disease. And he's like a cancer patient and he's withering. That's not it. She did that to him. She did that to him. I'm not going to look at it again. But what I do want to show you right now, let's remember this photo. Because this is a real child a real spirit, a real soul. You look in his eyes, I mean, no different than any other little child. All of our kids have problems, have issues, but our jobs as parents is to take care of them and to work through that with them to make their journey and their lives better, not to end their lives. He deserved a lot better, a whole lot better. And today the jury agreed as they rendered their verdict.
People of the state of Michigan versus Shanda Vander Ark, count 1, charging open murder involving the death of Timothy Ferguson. We find her guilty of first-degree felony murder. Count 2, first-degree child abuse. We find her guilty of first-degree child abuse.
There she is inside the courtroom, but she wasn't there for the verdict. She didn't show up today. We're going to talk about that this hour. Didn't even show up all day long inside the courtroom. Didn't even finish answering the questions that the jurors had. Now, in a trial, and you see it on court TV all the time, you know, there's two sides, and everyone in our system gets a defense attorney. But they're human also. They have a job to do, and thank goodness that they do it, because they keep the system honest, they make our system work. And I know sometimes we get frustrated, we get angry with the arguments that they make, the motions they make, the things they say, the way they cross-examine people, the way they talk about victims. I get all that. I'm with you on that. You know, I'm there as you are. But they're human. And Frederick Johnson, who represented the child killer, spoke with Court TV, Michael Ayala, Judge Ashley earlier today. And I think this gives you an idea of the impact a case like this can have. And it's not just, it's everyone that touches a case like this. Take a listen.
I passed the bar in 1986. This is the worst case I've ever handled. It's not even, I've handled cases with serial murders. This is the worst case I've ever handled. You do your job. The facts were terrible. The outcomes were worse. You do your job. You come in there, and your job is to represent this woman and to press for her point of view, and that's what you do. If you do that, and the prosecutor does that, and the jury does their end, and the judge does his end, justice gets done in the end, and that's the objective. Now comes the time when you have to sleep after the end. I mean, once you do all the intellectual stuff, the emotionality of it kicks in, and you got to sit down and you got to sleep with these facts and those images that are forever in my mind.
He's going to carry those images as well. I want to bring in our special guest joining us tonight, Chief Trial Attorney from Muskegon County Prosecutor's Office, prosecuted this case. Matt Roberts is with us. Matt, great to see you tonight. Give me where you are going through a case like this, you know, and when you prosecute a case, I mean, you dive deep. You've got to live it. Where are you emotionally right now?
Well, thank you for having me, Vinny. I appreciate it. You know, you really hit it there. Emotionally, this is, and I'd echo what Mr. Johnson said there in that clip. This is, I've been doing this for 22 years, and this is the most difficult case that I've ever had from an emotional standpoint. And I can tell you that when that verdict was read, there was just a sense of relief, a sense of just that relief washing over. I know the entire team, my trial partner, Kristen Gilmore, who I could not have done this without, and Lieutenant Duxima, who was right there with me from the Norton Shores Police Department, and the detectives. We all had a moment there afterwards. There was a lot of tears, there was a lot of emotion, but it was great to get it to this point. But we can never lose sight of the fact of why we're here, and that a young man lost his life just senselessly to get us to this point.
So let's go back a little bit. As you're first getting this case and going through and revealing and getting the evidence and going through it, what's going through your mind as you're digging through, figuring out exactly what happened and how it all happened?
Well, first and foremost, it was the hard work of the Norton Shores Police Department and the detectives involved here in bringing it to us. I actually first became aware of what was happening in the case when a good friend of mine called me. She actually conducted the interview of the minor child, the child that we referred to as G. Called me up the night that this had happened and said, "You just won't believe the things that I've just heard from this child." And she told me the details, the gruesome details, and I didn't believe it. I said, this just can't possibly be true. And then as things unfolded that next day, and talking to the medical examiner and talking to the detectives and deciding to make a charging decision here, it was all true. And frankly, that was just the tip of the iceberg. And as we prepared this case moving forward, each time we thought that we had reached the bottom, if you will, like that there was it could not get any worse. The behavior here, the conduct just couldn't get any worse. It did. And it was like that all the way up to trial and preparing it. So it was just gut punch after gut punch as we were doing this. But we never lost sight of what was important here, and that was to try to get the justice we could for Timothy, because he had become essentially a prisoner in his own home, and there was nobody that could speak out for him. There was nobody that could say, what's happening to this child isn't right, because of the efforts of his mother and in part the efforts of his brother.
How long was Timothy tortured for? What are you gathering from your investigation?
As near as we can tell, the first real reference to what is happening happens in February, early February. That's approximately a month or so after the stroke that unfortunately caused the minor child G's father to be out of the home, unable to be in the home, leaving the defendant with the three boys in the home. And all we can piece together really is through the text messages primarily. And we went back and poured over those text messages. Kristen and I split those up and just went through them line by line looking for it. And we started to identify in early February references to locking up the food, references to the restraints, references to first the zip ties and then later the cuffs. So it looks like early February. I wish I could say that I don't think Timothy was suffering all that time, but unfortunately I do. I think that's really when it started. And as the investigation progressed, it was obvious that she had gone to such great lengths to make sure that Timothy was not seen by anyone. He was homeschooled. He never was enrolled in school. He never went to a doctor. He was not even allowed outside. The only time he was outside was for punishments, and it was in the backyard. And frankly, the neighbors, the folks in the neighborhood, didn't even know that there was, knew about the older child, knew about the younger child, didn't even know that Timothy existed.
She was working as a law clerk, right? I mean, so what did people who were interacting with her outside of that home have to say about her? Did you get a picture of what sort of life she was leading there? And was there anything about that would make anyone think that there could potentially be something of the level of that darkness happening in her world?
Well, nothing that was uncovered during the investigation suggests that any of the neighbors had any idea what was taking place. Again, the only other adult that had been in the home, Adam Vander Ark, who tragically passed away earlier this year, was, because of the stroke, was out of the home, so he was not able to see what was taking place. Timothy's biological father and stepmother actually lived in Florida. So they were not able to see things, and the defendant went to some great lengths, as I indicated before, to make sure that even the grandmother, even Adam's parents, when they tried to come and see G, that they were not allowed into the home, to the extent that she was literally tracking them on their phones and trying to make sure that she beat them to her house and made sure that G would be outside to be picked up, so nobody would come into the home. I personally actually met her when she was working in her capacity as a clerk for one of our circuit court judges the year before this happened. And certainly there was nothing to indicate at that time that anything like this was taking place. I'd like to think that it wasn't happening at that time, because that was in summer of 2021, and that would have been right about the time that Timothy first came to live with her, and Adam was still in the home at that time. So it's just another one of those cases where people say, well, I never would have seen this from I never would have expected this from this person, but here we are in this prison that Timothy was kept in this home.
Now, there was so much evidence, including some videos that the jury didn't necessarily see, but you did a masterful job, your team, in presenting this case. That moment where you're cross-examining her and you put the photos in front of her, what did you think of that moment, and what did you think of her reaction?
Well, to be blunt, it seemed orchestrated, and I don't mean to suggest that Mr. Johnson or anyone on our team had a hand in that. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Mr. Johnson and his office, and as you indicated here at the beginning of the segment, that they have a job to do, and Fred's team does it, and Fred does it admirably, and he did so in this case. But it seemed just orchestrated on her part. I am convinced that she had seen those photographs before. So to have a reaction like that, it just didn't strike me as genuine. I believe that she had seen the photographs the week before. We had a hearing in front of the judge to determine whether or not the photographs were going to be allowed and under what circumstances. And they were displayed at that point. And she certainly did not appear to have that reaction. But, I wasn't that. I was walking away from her. She started to have that reaction. And I did not, once she started to whatever, dry heave or vomit or whatever it is that she did, I did not go up there. I certainly respected whatever level of privacy she was due at that point, but it felt rehearsed. It really did.
I was questioning it myself last night, and many times we see crocodile tears. This is the first crocodile heave, I think, in the history of court TV. Maybe it's a new trend. We'll see. Let me ask you this, because in these cases where the victim is the child and a parent is on trial for the murder, so many times it's so heartbreaking that there's no one in the courtroom for the victim. And prosecutors and investigators, I know, are so passionate, and you all are there. Was there anyone from outside of your team that was there for Timothy inside that courtroom?
There was. It was actually the stepmom who was actually able to make it up here from Florida, came up here, and she was also able to see Paul, the co-defendant in this case, briefly have a jail visit with him while she was up there. So it felt like there was at least somebody there that was there for Timothy. But quite frankly, anybody that's even touched even remotely this case has felt an affinity for it and an affinity for doing what was right for Timothy. And we had a lot of people in the courtroom. There were a lot of folks from my office. There was a lot of folks from Fred's office that were there. There were a lot of folks just off the street who had taken an interest in the case and felt like they needed to do the right thing. But again, in part primarily really because of the actions of the defendant and her efforts to just keep him isolated and keep him away from people. It was hard to get somebody there for him, but there were people there, and at the end of the day, we speak for the victims. We speak for those that can't speak for themselves anymore, and I'm proud to do that every day with the men and women at the Muskegon County Prosecutor's Office. Yeah,
and I always point this out to folks because people don't realize it. When we have folks like you dedicate years and years in a career to prosecuting criminals, I remind everyone that you could make a whole lot more money going out into private practice, whether you're doing works for corporations, even criminal defendants, if that would ever be a choice. But we need people like you who dedicate their careers to this, and it's not just guys like me who go in for a few years and then leave. You can't prosecute cases like this with young rookie prosecutors. You need experienced, dedicated professionals, and I hope, and I'm sure the folks in Muskegon County understand that. But I always like to remind people who are watching, because sometimes they forget, because you can make a lot of money. A great trial attorney like this can make a lot of money, folks. He does okay, but I mean, there's a level of sacrifice and true service in what you're doing. Let me ask you about Paul. Two things. What did you think of his relationship with his mother, his relationship with his brother, and what's his legal status, and what is going to happen to him?
So Paul represents, something of a challenge for our office and for me in dealing with this, because on the one hand, I do hold him responsible in part for what happened here. He was, for all intents and purposes, he was the enforcer of the punishments that the defendant in this case wanted to hand down, and all of those punishments combined are what were the basis of the first-degree child abuse charge, and ultimately he was a participant in the malnourishment, which is the cause of death and the basis for the murder charge. So I do hold him responsible for that. But I can't lose sight of the fact that I'm also dealing with a man who certainly does appear to have some special needs of his own. I've had an opportunity to meet with Paul several times in anticipation of him testifying, and I very genuinely got the impression that he feels genuine remorse for this, as he should. I'm not suggesting he shouldn't. He absolutely should. But it was clear from those meetings, and it was even clear from watching his testimony in court, that he would constantly look over towards the defendant as, I don't know if looking for some type of approval or looking to see if she was going to have a reaction. I'm told there was a very strong reaction that he had at one point during his testimony when he talked about that photograph that he took and sent to her a few weeks before Timothy passed away, that he actually gave him a full meal that day. That he looked over to see what her reaction would be to that, and I'm told she had quite the reaction to that, because it was the first time that she had heard that because her response in the text message was give him a piece of bread, but he actually ended up giving her a full meal. So we have to balance out that. It's sort of balancing out the good with the bad, and I've committed to Paul and to his attorney that if, and only if, he chooses to plead guilty to the first-degree child abuse charge, that I will make sure that I represent to the judge how he was instrumental and how he was helpful to us in order to achieve this conviction. But it doesn't forgive the bad, and he's been quite open and honest, and said he's not necessarily looking for forgiveness. He's hoping for some mercy, but I think he's prepared to accept what is coming to him. In terms of his actual legal status, I believe next week we are having a status conference, and it will be up to him and his attorney at that point to decide if they want to enter a plea or if they want to take the case to trial. It's not for me to speculate on that, and I'll leave them to their decision there.